Hello, listeners and faithful subscribers and followers. Welcome back to the Perseverance Mindset Podcast here in our lovely, lovely recording studio, here in our dialogue den, where we dive into some of the most engaging conversations that you'll listen to here. You won't get anywhere else. So today, we're going to dive into the raw truth behind global headlines and how they impact your freedom, your future, and your fight for perseverance. So, faithful listeners and subscribers, thank you. Thank you for your viewership, your listenership. You know who you are. We cannot thank you enough, Perseverance Pioneers. As this week, the United States and China have concluded high-stakes trade negotiations in London, Mario London, all those good chaps out there. And according to President Trump, the deal is finalized. The deal is inked. The deal is penned. But beneath the victory on Truth Social lies a web of economic leverage, technology, and restrictions. And of course, the game of geopolitical chess moves on in this financial Cold War. So we're going to unpack what was really decided, who blinked, what rare earths and AI chips have to do with this fragile peace, this fragile negotiation that's either in progress, whether this is just another temporary pause, or what's quickly becoming an escalation, yet another escalation in this financial Cold War that we find ourselves in. So if you've listened to us, don't forget to listen and subscribe and follow. If you listen to episode 43, Rare Earths, AI, and the New Financial Cold War, then you would know we've been tracking this power struggle and this chess game every step of the way. And in this episode, we're going into part 2 of that, because the last episode we filmed was Sunday night, the day before the talks were going to take place. The talks have been ongoing now since Monday. So we've had 3 days of those trade negotiations between the U.S. and China representatives. And the stakes are even higher now because the two sides are even meeting. The two superpowers are actually sitting down to discuss. So during these negotiations, these high-powered, high-stakes negotiations, you have to think to yourself, the two sides meet, they're in this table in London, they're in this mansion to discuss the future and financial and economic impact of these two nations and how the nation and negotiations will further from that discussion. So, because this isn't just about trade. Anybody that thinks this is just about trade, well, I have one thing to say to them. You haven't been paying enough attention. This is more than trade. This is about control. Control over minerals that power fighter jets, the chips that drive AI, and the global systems that determine who runs the table economically, geopolitically, and who will come out as a winner as the dominant superpower. So these systems will determine who leads that table. So let's jump into it. Where the real negotiations begin. So during this London negotiation, this London summit, it was a rainy 2-day summit inside Lancaster House. Never been. It's a historic mansion in central London, but what was happening inside could shape the future of global manufacturing, national security, and technological supremacy. Representing the USA, Team USA, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, fabulous, awesome guy. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, bulldog. He gets in there, he tells it like it is. And of course, U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer. He's along for the ride as well. And of course, the various delegations are representing China as well. The Vice Premier, lead negotiator, Vice Commerce Minister. And what did they reportedly agree on? Not yet final, but done, according to President Trump. And we hope these negotiations are highly, highly successful. So as the president did put it in Truth Social and made it an official all caps post, and you got to love the guy. The all caps is a statement, but it's a statement in every single post. You got to love him. Our deal with China is done. That was the post from our president. So what does that actually mean? So here's what we know from these negotiations so far. China has agreed in principle, mind you, to restart full exports of rare earths and magnets to the United States, which are vital for U.S. defense, electric vehicles, and tech manufacturing. President Trump confirmed that this includes full magnets and any necessary rare earths supplied up front by China. So what did we do to counteract those actions? The U.S. has agreed to ease some export controls on China, notably chip design software, non-military grade semiconductors, educational visas for Chinese students, which were under threat during everything that's been going on in this financial Cold War. But not everything is off the table. Commerce Secretary Lutnick said, we will maintain restrictions on high-end AI chips, especially NVIDIA-grade processors. Translation, what is he saying? AI dominance remains the battleground, and it will ensure and continue the reciprocity on the tariff front. So both countries have agreed to maintain the temporary 30%. I've heard a few numbers. I've heard 30, I've heard 55, US, and Chinese tariffs ceilings have agreed to 10% in Geneva with a pathway forward to future reductions pending a full deal implementation. What's not so clear? There are no published details of this enforcement mechanisms just yet. We can understand that. It's been 3 days. These are high pressure, high results-driven talks. The talks that take place in this room between these two superpowers are going to decide a lot going forward for both economies, both nations, all the citizens of those nations. This room, this table in London, is going to decide who will run the table for global trade and be the dominant superpower for the next 10 to 50 to possibly 100 years. So there aren't any published details, so we can understand that. But there's no mention of China's long-standing intellectual property theft. I was upset by that. I was a little bit discouraged in that because U.S. companies and U.S. manufacturers and people who make products here have been getting ripped off from China stealing their business ideas, their products, and then cheaply manufacturing them and putting them back into the market to compete directly with our manufacturers. It's not fair. We can't take China to court in these matters. Nothing matters. They don't consider it a crime. So I was a little bit disappointed with that. And no resolution, of course, on Taiwan-related tensions, because it's not alone that we have Russia-Ukraine going on. We have Israel-Hamas going on. We have to have President Xi putting feelers out there, running military exercises, talking about Taiwan should be worried, talking about how these are general exercises. I know Russian President Vladimir Putin was saying that his exercises were just troop trainings as well, and then they went in and invaded Ukraine. So can't really take people at their words, especially superpowers, when you're unsure of what they're going to really do. Need to see the actions. But there was no resolution to those tensions. But what makes this moment different? Rewinding to episode 43, where we did discuss the Geneva pause to the tariffs, which many people praise, it sent markets surging in May. That was supposed to cool things down, but the thing is, it didn't. Both sides did escalate in their own right. China choked rare earths, and the U.S. blocked chip design tools in response to that. It's tit for tat, of course. Nobody's going to show weakness. Nobody's going to show face. Nobody's going to show that the economic hurt that both countries could be facing. And then the U.S. also had massive visa revocations. They were weaponized. Again, during this financial Cold War, this isn't a war of weapons. This is a war of policy. It's a war of tariffs. It's a war of trade. It's a war of everything, including the possibility for anything in the future. So is this London deal a turning point, or is it just a timeout between these two superpowers, which they are? So the vice premier of China made China's stance clear. There are no winners in a trade war. Well, would you consider that from the side that's been really benefiting from the uneven handed side of trade for the last 50 years? Would they be the ones to say there's nobody that wins a trade war? When these massive tariffs were announced and products stopped coming into the U.S. because of the high price, China was facing massive protests from their own citizens. Let's just say that their economy isn't really in the best shape. And when you cut off people's livelihood of the jobs, the little jobs that they do have to earn the little money that they do make, stuff starts to get real. Stuff starts to get real very quick. There was national protests from when these tariffs were implemented in China. Things weren't looking well. So this pause was beneficial. So there are no winners in a trade war. China does not want to fight, but we are not afraid to fight. That coming from Vice Premier of China. And, this isn't just rhetoric. This is the new doctrine in this financial Cold War. Cooperation if convenient, confrontation if necessary. And that leads us directly into our next segment. So the U.S. and China are locked into a high-stakes financial Cold War for control over materials and technology that power everything from electric cars to hypersonic missiles. This is where we find ourselves. And those are, again, rare earths. Some call them the spices. But it might not sound that exciting, but without them, the modern world just shuts down. So many things are produced and have a hand in this global rare earth into these minerals. And China controls over 80% of the global supply and processing capability. If the pandemic taught us anything, a reliance on China, any foreign power, any foreign government for anything during times of such national emergency is not a benefit, it's a liability. And we realized that very quick. So in April, China quietly imposed a new licensing rule that choked rare earth exports, dropping over 20% year over year. And it was a warning shot. Of course, this was a warning shot to the U.S. chip sanctions. So 90-day pause and other reactions behind the scenes of we're only getting started, basically, just telling both sides when they're clashing. So the U.S. responded with its own restrictions, blocking chip design software sales, threatening to revoke Chinese student visas, limiting NVIDIA's most powerful AI processors from going to China, from being exported. So in short, we're seeing weaponization of everything. This is the new Cold War. This is the financial Cold War. And it's enacted. It was put to the forefront. It was to address a long-standing trade imbalance. So we are hopeful that we can get all these people to the table and address that with them directly, and we can hammer out a deal that is mutually beneficial to their country and to our country to fix that imbalance. So today's framework agreement includes a promise. China will resume shipments of rare earths to the U.S. up front. But the question is, at what cost? What is this going to cost in the future? Commerce Secretary Lutnick suggested the U.S. will ease restriction in a balanced way, as the president has stated. So this just may be a calculated exchange, rare earths for mid-tier chips, magnets for software. This is how negotiations happen. Access to education, access to materials, but the U.S. is holding firm on AI chips, and that may be the red line for both sides in this AI arms race. So here's where it gets personal. AI dominance is no longer academic. It's existential. So China, once crippled by U.S. sanctions, stunned the world in 2023 by releasing the Mate 60, powered by advanced Chinese-made chips, a direct challenge to Washington's assumption that China couldn't and wouldn't keep up. They were wrong, of course, as experts mostly commonly are, depending on track records. U.S. officials considered it a wake-up call. I would say so. And also double down on export bans. Now the president, our new president, is walking a line, opening certain chip lanes, but doubling down on AI-related restrictions. So Kevin Hassett has also commented that the National Economic Council made it plain and simple. We're open to mid-level microchip cooperation, but NVIDIA grade AI chips, they're off limits. They're not part of anything that we are discussing. That's because those chips train war-fighting AI, anonymous weapons, and surveillance systems. Is it starting to make sense why those chips are completely off limits and not being brought up in these discussions? This is no longer about trade. It's about who writes the code of supremacy for AI and trade for the future. So let's not forget, the world is watching. The European Union is watching, Japan, India, Australia. The West is scrambling to break China's rare earth monopoly. But can we really do it? So even Ukraine's rare earth reserves, which the U.S. just reached another crucial deal with Ukraine on rare earths, recently brought into the spotlight, may help the U.S. actually diversify those supply chains for rare earths. All positive things, all things that you want to see nations doing, especially asking ourselves why we haven't been doing them. That might be a bigger question. So in Geneva, in London, and now perhaps the next summit in Tokyo, we're witnessing not just a trade negotiation, but an emergence of new alliances built around minerals, semiconductors, and artificial intelligence. This is the financial Cold War. This is the thick and the thin of it. But this time, the weapons aren't nukes, they're nanometers. So, Perseverance Pioneers, we are living through a seismic shift in global alliances, global power. And if you're not just observers of that, you're not just observers. You're listening to a great podcast here. You're listening to information you're not going to get anywhere else. You're listening to a viewpoint you're not going to get anywhere else. But this London deal may bring a short-term relief to markets and manufacturers, and we're rooting for Team USA. We want these to be highly, highly successful. We want our businesses to do well. We want our main streets to do well. We want our CEOs and our companies, we want them to take on innovation, to hire new people, to create more jobs. Those are the things we want. And this London deal may be on the path to getting us there. But beneath the surface, this is the U.S. China financial Cold War. It's far from over. This is about more than exports. It's about values. It's about freedom versus control, innovation versus imitation, and ultimately, who will win in that stalemate? That is who will shape the future. We'll be here at the Perseverance Mindset Podcast, live here from our dialogue den, breaking it all down for you, our Perseverance pioneers out there, with clarity, courage, and our commitment to you. So until next time, I am your host. This is the Perseverance Mindset Podcast. Have a great night, everyone.